My name is Karl Spencer. I'll be hosting this fatigue management webinar. We're going to try and keep the webinar very short and compelling, and your screen is going to change very shortly in order to give you the maximum benefits of the slides that I'm showing. So without hesitation, let's get straight into it. What is fatigue? Fatigue is a symptom, not a cause. And it's a symptom caused by a combination of excessive working time, working over your normal working hours, poorly designed shift patterns, and this could be just from going from a night shift to a day shift, to an afternoon shift, back to a night shift. And also the workload, people's excessive workloads, so they're working them longer hours. And that could be just an office worker as well, because now they have access to their emails 24/7. You kind of find people working a lot longer hours. It's also defined as a decline in mental and/or physical performance. And that's because of prolonged exertion, continued sleep loss, and a disruption to the internal clock. All elements that decline physical performance and mental performance. So what is the risk that we face? What is the risk as a business and as a person we face? Well, fatigue needs to be managed in your business like any other hazard that we look at today. That be slips, trips, manual handling, electrical hazards. It's still a hazard and it still needs to be managed. And do not underestimate the risks of fatigue. Fatigue can kill. Fatigue has killed. You know, from falling asleep while driving a vehicle, falling in charge of heavy machinery, tired and you're not doing the right thing. You're not concentrating fully. So do not underestimate the risks of fatigue. As I quickly said earlier, there is a legal duty on employees to manage risks from fatigue. It's in the Health and Safety at Work Act. Regulation 3 of the Management at Work regulations is about doing risk assessments for fatigue. And don't think a bit of ignorance there. So if there's an individual's willingness to work extra hours, that you're not at risk no more. You still have to account for that in your business. So I want to quickly talk about a real life scenario. I was speaking at an event earlier this year about fatigue, and I was talking about the mobilization of people, the risks of shift patterns, and I went on for 10 minutes into my 20-minute talk. And in the middle of this, a lady shouted out in the audience. She says, "Karl, thank you very much for highlighting some of the things that we already know about, but also the things that you're talking about would not have helped my husband, Harry." So I asked this lady to expand a little bit more on her story. And she says, "My husband, Harry, he left work at 5:15 every morning. He left work in his minibus and he picked up 6 workers on the way to doing a daily shift. He finished his day shift and then he'd return all them workers back to their home before returning home himself. And he'd normally get home about 9 o'clock at night. And he's done this for many years. Now, on this specific day, he didn't turn up at the allotted time. So his wife rang around the people and got to the person that he'd left last. And they said, "Harry left me about an hour ago." So a little bit more panic set in, so they drove out to see if they could find him anywhere. And they came across a minibus in the ditch on the side of the road. Harry obviously fell asleep, veered off the road and ended up in a ditch. Now Harry was all right. He had cut some bruises to his head and a bruised shoulder from the seatbelt. And when they woke him up, he was all dazed and confused. Now it's this bit here that was the really interesting thing for me, was to say, how can we manage that? How can we reduce that risk? How can we help Harry make sure that he does get home to his family safe at night? Because this lady pointed out to me in the audience that Harry wouldn't have shouted out. Harry wouldn't have shouted out to his line manager that he was feeling tired. He was a proud individual. He dedicated his time to dropping all them workers off, and that was his responsibility. So he wouldn't have shouted out, "Excuse me, Mr. Line Manager, I'm a bit tired. I'm going to take tomorrow off." And that leads into the second one, that management didn't really know this. They failed to realise that Harry was doing 3.5, 4 hours over and above everybody else. They failed to take into account the travelling time to and from workplaces. And it was that what caused this accident. Not from understanding that fatigue is a symptom, and not from understanding the causes. It was simply that we had a person who would not shout up, and management could not see this. And it's that reason I'm trying to do this webinar today, is to show you that how easy this is to be solved. So I'm going to show you the screen dashboard from your Safety Pal. And on this dashboard, we can see a button here that says Work Report for all staff. We'll go through to that dashboard, and we get our work report for all this month. Obviously, I've clicked on November, so it's showing me all the working hours for the people in my company in November. And I can see instantly here a red flag. A red flag showing that somebody in the company has exceeded 12 hours and 22 minutes. And I can see other people in the company are working within their allotted parameters. So Safety Pal has each individual worker's parameters get entered in, and then we can work out their times based on the working time directives. So from this red flag, a line manager needs to go and do something. So a line manager would click on the fatigue risk report. He'd then be took through to the last 7 day fatigue risk report. And we can see instantly here the explanation of what that shift was and the timings. We can also see on the other elements there how many shifts that worker had, the rest time between shifts. And that instantly would allow that line manager to ring Harry up and say, we've done our fatigue risk report, we can see that you've got excessive hours, so please take tomorrow off, and I will get somebody else to cover your shift. And it's quite important to tell Harry that, because as we know, he wouldn't have shouted up. But the first question Harry would have raised was, who's going to take the other workers to work? So make sure you say to that worker, I will cover your workload. I will get it sorted. Don't worry about it. Take a maximum rest time that you need. And then hopefully Harry would have took the next day off. Now, Safety Pal's fatigue risk report would automatically calculate that because he hasn't signed into a job. So that's classed as rest period. And if we did a fatigue risk report 2 days later, his risk would be a lot lower. And hopefully he's onto the green element of his working hours. So let's move on. The HSE also state that compliance with working time directives alone is insufficient to manage risks of fatigue. We need more. We need something else. We need to do that little bit more. Now, we need to do the risk assessment, as it mentions under Regulation 3. And that risk assessment could be to include stress, you know, the control and the support to our workers to know that we are there to help them. And also other elements in a risk assessment would be things like hydration, planned breaks. I know it sounds simple when you put it on screen, but it's about putting it down and communicating this to the worker to know that that's okay. Other workers to look out for signs of fatigue, to know that that's themselves and be aware of the colleagues around them. And ultimately to put into a long-term strategy in place to manage our own workers and contractors, because contractors do form part of the Health and Safety at Work Act under Section 3. Please look that up if you get time. And it's all these elements that we need to put together. But again, we can still do that little bit more. We can still raise that awareness. Safety Pal uses videos that these workers can watch on their phones and their tablets at any time, 24/7, 365. We're giving that support on their phones so they don't have to come into the office and be interrogated about stress, anxiety, tiredness. They can do this in their own time on their own phone, and you'll have an audit trail that we know that we're helping with these people. We also need to increase training and knowledge to let them know that the rest times they take is massively important. Socializing, exercise, spending time with the family is important in order to reduce fatigue. And all that together is a way forward that we can help reduce and hopefully eradicate this awful disease. So you do have a choice. As a company, we can continue with a reduced well-being part of the business and continue to be at risk. Or after the information I've just get you, we can look forward to successfully managing fatigue and other well-being elements in our business. And not only by successfully managing fatigue and well-being do we ensure Harry can get home safe and the other 7,000 cases that happened in the period of 17 to 18, but we're also become compliant as well. So that's protecting our business should the worst happen. So thank you very much for watching this demonstration. I'd like to point you out to, if you want to go onto yoursafetypal.com and go forward to the demonstration page, then there's a button that you can click on, and then we can book you in and we can explain more. We can show you how easy this is to help and solve. And also, please take a look out for our other webinars in the November series. And you can find that at yoursafetypal.com/webinars. So thank you very much for taking the time. Please feel free to get in touch with us on anything that you need. Take care. Goodbye.